Also joining us from London is i24news correspondent there, Jonathan Sacerdoti, ahead of the meeting today between Erekat and Kerry. Good morning to you, Jonathan.
Good morning.
What's on the agenda, and also it's happening in London, in the UK, you know, in a continent that actually has made it no secret that it's trying to push for a unilateral move for a Palestinian statehood. So what's on the agenda today for the Kerry Erekat meeting?
As you say, there have been those votes in several key European countries and even the EU itself discussing the idea of Palestinian statehood being declared ahead of any agreement between the two sides, Israel and the Palestinians. So, of course, that's part of the concerted effort being made at the moment to get international recognition for a state ahead of there being any agreement in peace talks, and that's what they'll be discussing at today's meetings. According to Palestinian sources, Kerry had requested to meet with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in London, but the latter declined and sent his representatives instead. So Erekat will be there, as well as Palestinian intelligence chief Majid Faraj. And Mr. Kerry is expected to meet today with Mr. Erekat and also with Nabil El Arabi, the Secretary General of the Arab League. And then later today, France's Fabius, the Foreign Minister, is also set to meet with El Arabi on the same time, at the same day. So that's what's coming ahead today, but there's very little indication of exactly what they'll agree. And it's still thought that the French are trying to push their own particular initiative instead of this one being put by the Palestinians, and that they're trying to garner support from Britain, from Germany, and of course from the US in order to perhaps put off that Palestinian-backed initiative at the UN.
No, that push. You are staying with us, Jonathan. I just want to touch on that, on the Palestinian and this specific bid, which is the Arab Initiative. And we'll also join on the phone by member of the Fatah Revolutionary Council, Dimitri Diliani, speaking with us from East Jerusalem. Dimitri, I want to ask you, because I read them late last night, that even Mr. Erekat has said that he knows the Palestinians' bid, that this specific bid does not have the agreement of the 9 member states at the Security Council. So, I mean, I know this is actually a show of resolution on the Palestinian side, but if it doesn't pass, and it seems likely that it will not pass, what is the Palestinian side going to do?
Well, regardless whether it passes or not, the next step is very clear. I mean, we declared that going to the Security Council is the first step. If it doesn't work, we are going to join international bodies, including the ICC. Now, this is what Israel is trying to prevent. So for us, if they don't want us to go to the ICC, well, pass us through the Security Council, as simple as that. And yes, Netanyahu is trying to play that into the elections. And yes, we want him to do that, because by doing that, he will drive the state of Israel to more isolation. He will play this as part of his internal political campaign. And knowing Netanyahu and his history, he's willing to sacrifice the best interests of the state of Israel in order for him to stay a couple of more years in his office. So, in other words, Netanyahu will use it to promote his right-wing agenda, and we will use that to make our point to the international community that the state of Israel is not willing to achieve peace, and the state of Israel, led by somebody like Netanyahu, Bennett, and the rest of the gang, is taking Israel to a dead end. Now, whether the Israeli public sees that or not, honestly, at this point, we would not play in that. It's none of our business. We respect democracy. We respect the choices of the Israeli public.
And Dimitri, first of all, I got to tell you that I think you're doing some of the job of Netanyahu's political foes for them. But stay with us, because you raise a very interesting point about the elections. Tal Shalev, obviously still with us in studio. When it comes to the elections, as you said, Netanyahu's platform would be to sell it on security. You had a chance yesterday also to be in a speech of the Israeli Foreign Minister, Mr. Lieberman, who said a very interesting thing when it comes to this push and bid, and what about the United States vetoing or not vetoing the Palestinian bid.
Well, in the past year, Lieberman has been going through some kind of image shift, and at least regarding the relationship with the U.S., he's definitely been playing the responsible adult. He has a very good relationship with Secretary Kerry, and he's been defending him almost in every public platform he could.
When other ministers in Netanyahu's cabinet had no problem saying things that really put the country into a mix of trouble with the United States.
So Lieberman now competing with Netanyahu and actually in the midst of a very harsh battle of words with the Likud party, gives a speech, a kind of foreign policy speech, talks about Israel's diplomatic image, but he does say that now is the time to be pragmatic and not fanatic. And he's not only directing to Netanyahu, he's also directing to the defense minister, Ya'alon, and to the economy minister, Naftali Bennett, who have been lashing out at Kerry and the U.S. in the past few months. So he says one cannot lash out at the U.S. and then expect them to veto. We need our friends. We need to be pragmatic and think about the moments of truth that we need our friends. And now is this kind of moment of truth. But everything, the politics and diplomacy is so much involved here. Yes, last week I met a senior European official who told me that political figures inside Israel have actually been approaching the Europeans, and actually some of them telling the Europeans, this is the time to move forward, don't stop because of the elections. We want to expose how Netanyahu is leading Israel to international isolation. So there's a lot going on here behind the scenes. In any case, you cannot separate this from the campaign. This cannot be separated from the campaign, and the campaign cannot be separated from it. So it creates a much more complex diplomatic situation for all sides, basically.
For all sides. And speaking of that, Jonathan Sacerdoti joining us from London, where, as we mentioned, the Erekat Kerry meeting is going to be taking place today. When it comes to the French to the French bid that you mentioned, there's also actually the headlines in Israel today are filled with the Netanyahu asking France to stop the Palestinian current bid. How involved is Europe in this talks? I mean, where you're sitting at, and how is it being played out in the European press?
Well, there is this French bid, so Europe is trying to play its part. And as we said before, there is the phenomenon that different European countries have been somehow taking part in this push for unilateral recognition without any actual agreement having been sorted out in advance. So the French proposal, whilst tough on Israel, doesn't seem to go far enough for the Palestinians, because it compels both sides to conclude negotiations by a certain fixed point in the future, assuming that a deal will be done along the lines of the 1967 armistice lines. Right. But it doesn't deal with essential issues that are important to Benjamin Netanyahu, and in fact most in Israeli politics, like the recognition of Israel as a Jewish state and the complicated security requirements that Israel would have, obviously, and of course that right of return, whereby millions of Palestinians would have a right to go back to Israel even if there was a state of Palestine in the future. So those things aren't dealt with. So on the one hand, it looks quite tough to Israel, but on the other hand, this French proposal is there to try and soften the blow of what the Palestinians are otherwise suggesting should be taking place, which is simply a recognition of statehood by a fixed point on the calendar with no mention of any kind of negotiation. And I think that that's what's key. The Guardian here, you asked about the press, it quotes an anonymous senior Palestinian official as saying that the French proposal has, quotes, killed the substance of our resolution. The French are talking about a time frame for a conclusion of peace talks. We are talking about ending occupation, end quote. So that's what the Palestinians are saying. And in that sense, that highlights the problem. The Palestinians prefer to push some sort of agenda where there are no negotiations. Instead, they're after simple recognition because they are either disappointed the negotiation has failed in the past time and time again, or their calculation is that they feel they can get much more this way by pushing and pushing, waiting in a sense for the frustration and the boredom of Europe and the international community, and then hoping that they can cash that in such a way that they'll get much more than they would if they go through any kind of negotiation. And of course, it's Benjamin Netanyahu who is saying that that's exactly the problem, that by encouraging this sort of unilateralism, Britain, France, Germany and the United States would in fact be giving away far too much to the Palestinians and risking the security of Israel, which is still a great ally of all of those countries, perhaps the strongest ally in the Middle East, considering its Western-style democracy and values.
Which some people will argue otherwise, but very, very valid points. Dimitri, quickly to you, when I'm listening to Jonathan and Tal, I'm wondering, actually, isn't this push right now playing straight into the hands of a campaign of Benjamin Netanyahu, who seems to be somebody that I'm sure the Palestinian Authority does not want to see anymore at the head of Israel? And I'm asking you straight up front, doesn't this actually play into the whole security platform agenda of the Israeli Prime Minister, a unilateral bid?
Well, it's not unilateral because we're going out to the world after 20 years of reaching nothing with the state of Israel after we tried again, time and again with Netanyahu. Netanyahu and his government explicitly said in the media they're not really interested in a two-state solution, the way that we view it. But at the end of the day, even if we get this resolution passed, it will not materialize unless there were negotiations.
Right.
We understand that. Everybody in the world understands that. So the whole issue of Israel's security doesn't fit into this, except for the playing on the psyche of the Israeli people, which Netanyahu has so far been doing greatly, being a big PR professional rather than statesman. So that's what he's selling to the world, but nobody buys it anymore. The world is sick and tired of listening to the same excuse that Netanyahu and the right-wing camp is being given to stay away from paying the deeds of a peace process. Peace does not come for free. You got to pay for it. You want to live a normal life, you have to let others live a normal life.
Okay.
And I have to add at the end that our right of self-determination cannot be kept, will not be kept hostage in the hands of another nation, which is the state of Israel, regardless who's leading that state.
Dimitri, thank you. And finally, Tal Shalev.
Just
yes.
to add that, unfortunately for the Palestinians, the world isn't the one voting or going to the ballots in the Israeli elections, but the Israeli public is, and it's not clear that the Israeli public sees the same picture as the international community does.
No. Very, very, very valid point. But thank you all. Tal Shalev, Dimitri Diliani from East Jerusalem, and obviously Jonathan Sacerdoti in the UK.